TRC EDC back again with another knife video. So I'm trying to do a short review of this. This is the Hoback Husky, and this is an interesting knife from Hoback. The maker has undergone some controversy recently, and we will address that. So get the comments out of the way now if you want to drop them below on the fact that I'm running the video, or you can wait until later on in the video when I go ahead and talk about that issue. So first of all, let's go ahead and do some size comparisons on this, actually, before we get to the good. The size comparisons are going to be important, so we're going to do a bunch of them, frankly, because this is a huge, thick knife. It's called the Husky for a reason, and we're going to take a look at that. So the first obvious comparison, well, before we get to the obvious ones, here's just your regular comparisons with the Paramilitary 2 from Spyderco and the Para 3, so you can definitely see this is a pretty big knife. And we're also going to, show you the thickness as well, because I think that's important on most of these size comparisons. Now, normally I don't show the thickness of all the knives. Here's the mini Griptilian and the Griptilian from Benchmade. Again, pretty big knife here. But because this is one of the selling points is the thickness on this blade, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that against some other models. This is the Spyderco Shaman and the Spyderco Military. So you can see it is pretty much around the same size as the Military, maybe a little bit smaller, but bigger than the Shaman, and you can definitely see the thickness there, much thicker than both, especially the Military. All right, here it is against some other Hoback models. Here's the Snex Buster, the Hoback Summit, which is a pretty huge knife in and of itself. This is sort of the larger brother of the Sumo. Here's the Hoback Quayback, and we're going to do some thickness comparisons there. And we'll also do the XM18 and the XM24. And again, you can see the thickness on these. I know I'm doing a ton of size comparisons on this one, but I think this is one of the big selling points of the knife, so we're going to go ahead and cover it. Here's the AD-20. And I think these are the size comparisons most people are going to want to see, which is the Medfords, right? So here's the Marauder H and the Medford full thickness Marauder. So you're going to see that the Marauder H, the full thickness Marauder is a similar size to the Husky, and the Marauder H is going to be a little bit smaller. Let's go ahead and take a look at the blade stocks there. You can see the thickness of this versus this, and this is a little bit skinnier. So I'll go ahead and pull that one off, and here's the Slim Midi. So you're going to see this is much thicker than the Slim Midi, obviously. Now, as far as the thickness of the regular Midi Marauder, the regular Midi Marauder is going to be the same thickness as the Marauder H. And then again, you can see the difference in the blade thickness. So I'm going to go ahead and show real quick the .26 Marauder, and you can actually see that the Hoback is slightly thicker than the full thickness Marauder, which is pretty damn impressive on thickness. So if you've ever had a full thickness Marauder, you'll have an idea of just how chunky this is, since it's actually thicker than the Marauder. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the good. So first of all, the good is going to be the size on this. If you like chunky knives, that's the whole point you're buying this for. If you don't like chunky knives, there are, I believe, the Slimline. It might be the A15 or the A10, I can't remember exactly, but this is basically the thicker version of that knife. And so if you want something a little bit thinner, that would be what you're looking at. As far as the the general blade shape and everything. The general blade shape is pretty good. It has sort of this this tanto grind. Both of these are flat grinds, so you're not going to get like amazing cutting, an amazing cutting edge here. One of the main differences between this and the full thickness Marauder, for example, is going to be the fact that the Marauder is a hollow grind right here, and you're going to get a little bit better of an edge as a result. And so you can see sort of the grinds here. The fuller here can be used actually to flick the knife out, which is awesome. So if you like to Spidey flick, you can definitely roll it out with a fuller. You can use the fuller with your thumb there, which also makes it a little bit more fidget friendly, but I'm gonna be honest, I never really open it that way. It's mostly either gonna be that that middle finger flick or the flipper tab. Now I will say, because of the size of this thing, the middle finger flick, usually I end up using a little bit of wrist, but as you saw right there, I can go ahead and flick it out nicely even without the wrist. So that's good. The milling on here gives good weight relief on the scales because these are pretty thick slabs of titanium. And the clip on here actually does pretty good. They also sell a deep carry clip, but you'd have to pay extra for that. And the lanyard hole is out of the way, although it does stick up a little bit, so just be aware of that. The blade, like I said, is a little bit thick for cutting, but it does do its job. It goes through cardboard, no problem. This does come in a couple of different options. I believe there's, a sort of a mixed color one where there's some black and gray. There's also the all stone-washed one where both the blade and the handle are stone-washed, and they have that really nice gray. It's sort of like this gray. It's almost like actually, it might be a bead blast. But that's the gray that you would get on this one as the other option, or one of the other options. And then you sort of have a mix of the, I can't remember if it's the black blade and the gray handle or the gray handle and the black blade, but something along those lines. These are generally priced pretty well on the secondary market, if you can get them on the secondary market. Part of that has to do with, what I'm going to talk about when I get to the bad, but you can find them probably for around, $400 to $450 now. If there was a time where the market has sort of bottomed out and there were some that were being sold in the 300 range, but I think that time has ended and we're back to around the 400s to mid 400s on the price of these, as most of the people who were doing a sell-off ended up selling off. So, but this is a $575 knife, which you can get, for that 400 to 450 range. So that's good in and of itself for that. That's pretty much, I think, what I would. The other thing that's great on this is the box. So Hobacks all come in this wooden box with sort of a sliding top, with one of those all the logo and everything is sort of burned into the box lid. It reminds me a lot of what White River does, right? So the boxes are all pretty well done in that regard. They also come with patches, so it's kind of like Pokemon. You collect them all, right? The patches are a little, they're like animated. They're a little bit, they're not like tough. They're like, I guess cheeky would be the word. But they're supposed to be fun. I could, give or take the patches, but it is a cool little extra thing that they do that I am pretty happy about. In any event, that'll be the good. The bad on this, I have to say, like, the ergonomics are not bad for the fact that it's that it is as big as it is, but because it's so chunky and I have size large gloved hands, I would say this definitely is not nearly as ergonomic as like the front half of I would say a sculpted, well, even the regular Marauder that's not sculpted, like this one's not sculpted, right? So the front half, I think, is more ergonomic. The back half, I would say, is, I don't know. This is probably a little bit more ergonomic than the back half of a Marauder, but I'd probably put it at around a maybe a 6 out of 10, given how chunky it is on the ergonomic scale, which is okay. It's not terrible, but it's not my favorite either. I will say that the lanyard hole, sort of just sticks up, and there's a good amount of this that sticks out of the pocket, which, given how thick it is not really ideal. It also is a big chunk weight in the pocket, so just be aware you can't wear this with a lot of other. I wouldn't wear it with shorts. I have before, but it's definitely not the easiest. You definitely can't run with it when you have shorts. So it'll drag those pants down, right? So you got to make sure that you're probably only carrying this in jeans, or I actually wear slacks most of the time because I work in an office, and I still tend to carry a lot of this stuff. But and it does work with slacks, but just be aware that you're going to have quite a bit sticking up, right? It's going to look like that. So there's that. Next, the pivot's sort of uninteresting on this, and the design isn't necessarily, like, the aesthetic isn't necessarily my favorite, but it's not terrible on the aesthetic. If it really does it for you, great, but it's not really my design aesthetic. The jimping on here is a little aggressive for what it is, especially over here, right? The back end actually is a little bit thicker, you can see on the jimping, but the front end up here where your thumb goes, you can see how thin those jimps are and how far spaced apart they are, which makes it a little aggressive. Like, it's uncomfortable to pull my thumb back and forth across this. Yes, you get positive grip and positive traction, which is great, but you'll also get, I don't know if you can see that, but you'll also get it digging into your fingers, so not necessarily ideal. Flipper tab on here is huge. Nick Shabazz would hate it, but Nick Shabazz would probably hate most of this knife. But it is, I sort of like the chunky knives. As you can see, I've got a bunch of Medfords and a bunch of other big knives, so including a Strider Yeti XL. So I've got plenty of large knives, and I'm not afraid to carry them. So I don't mind that aspect of it. I actually think it's one of the attractive features of this knife. As far as, it's got the Hoback rolling detent, and actually has pretty good action as a result. As you can see here, it isn't drop shut, but it is pretty decently, I would say pretty decently, smooth as it comes down. The detent is decent enough, but it could be better, which is why I'm sort of including it in the negative section. But it's sort of neutral on the detent, to be honest. Whoops, just scratching my leather here. Yeah, it's kind of neutral at the end of the day. So there's that. Let's get to the sort of the elephant in the room here. This is made in China. Now, is that a problem? For some people it is, for other people it's not. It can be a problem. It can't, sometimes it's not a problem. If you're in the camp of it's not a problem, there's another problem with this, that is the fact that, there's no really way to beat around the bush with this, but Hoback, it appears that Hoback has misled much of the public for a very long time about the origin of the knives. Now, from what I can tell, he didn't outright say everything was made in the U.S. And in fact, it was another retailer, probably Blade HQ, that listed everything that came out of his shop as being made in the U.S. The problem is he didn't really correct it. His explanation that he tried to and then gave up, I wasn't necessarily buying. But really the worst part of it is they USA Made Blade, which is a great retailer, by the way. USA Made Blade, he sold to USA Made Blade knowing that their entire business model was USA Made products, and was selling to them knives made in China. Some of them in whole, some of them in part, some of them are made partly in the US. Like the Quayback, for example, is made, according to Hoback himself, and this is, I guess, the quote, all or a majority of parts are made in the US. So possibly the entire thing's made in the US, possibly most of it, but this one is listed as all or a majority of the parts are made in China. And so just be aware of that. When I say it's listed as that, he put up something on his Instagram after the whole controversy started, basically saying where things are made, and then pulled it down. People snapped screenshots beforehand about which models were made from which origins, but it really didn't go far enough to really explain where things were. At the end of the day, why is this a problem? Mainly, there's an integrity issue. There also is the issue of, he's misleading retailers and, frankly, the public. He was selling. Now, could these knives compete in the price category they're at? And by the way, this is part of the negative. The price on this is $575. Not a terrible price considering the chunks of titanium and everything else that you're getting, but it's not a great price for a Chinese knife. The same goes for some of the other knives the knives that Hoback makes. If you're paying for U.S. made stuff, usually you're paying a little bit more. If you're charging the public U.S. made prices and sort of going along with the fact that everything is made in the U.S., even though you know for a fact that it's not all made in the U.S., and you're not going out of your way to correct other retailers besides the original one that you quote unquote corrected. There's some problems there. So look, controversy aside, can I recommend the knife? Not as an EDC. This is going to be for somebody who just wants a chunky knife. If you like the full-size Marauder and you like knives of, the full-size Praetorian tie, things like that, you'll probably enjoy this knife. And, and it's going to be a good knife in that regard. The value is also there for somebody, especially on the secondary market, who's used to paying prices that Medford charges, for example, for a Praetorian tie, where you're paying usually between, probably $1,300 and $2,500 for a Praetorian tie, right? Well, if this is $575 retail and $400 to $450 on the secondary, then you're getting a steal. But you're also getting something that is not comparable to Medford because it's not made in the U.S. It's not handmade. Medfords aren't all handmade, but there's a lot of handwork that goes into Medfords, and that the same it doesn't appear can be said for Hobacks. I'm sure there's some hand finishing going on these, some hand assembly, but until they get more transparency in their process, I can't really say that they're going to the same lengths as some other makers. So it is really important to note that, so I can, as far as like controversy aside, I can recommend it for people who are used to these thicker knives, but not for EDC. But with the controversy involved, it's not a knife I would recommend, and at this point, I know I have a bunch of Hobacks. I'm not convinced it's a company I want to support. In fact, I'm pretty annoyed with the fact that, like a lot of these got devalued when all this went down. So now, I essentially lose money. Anyone who owns Hobacks lose money. You owned Hobacks at the time that this happened. If you're acquiring them now, you're probably fine. But at least on the secondary market. But if if you're acquiring them at new prices or you had them already, you're losing money, and it's because of the fact that they don't have that transparency in their processes. It's because of the integrity issue. It just really is not something that I was happy about, or something that I would support. So that's my recommendations on the knife itself, and with the company involved. It really is sort of a sad thing because, frankly, my Snex Buster, for example, which is discontinued, it's one of my favorite knives. It really is. It's one of my favorite knives. The milling on this is awesome, and the general feel of it and everything. I just love this knife. But the brand has a sour taste in my mouth, and don't know what to do about that at this point. Guys, what are your thoughts on, I actually do want to hear what your thoughts are on Hoback in general. Is this a knife you would want to buy? Do you want to support the company? Do you not want to support the company? I'm curious to hear your thoughts below. This is one of those videos where I actually really really would want to know what's going on, with people's thoughts. So I know I took a while to post something about this Hoback issue, but I didn't want to address it right away when it was happening, and I still sort of want to sit back and see what happens. But as I'm doing a review of a knife, I have to be honest about what's going on. Jake Hoback, if you see this and you want me to give you some, I know you have your own YouTube channel, so you could give yourself transparency if you wanted to. But if you want me or any other, YouTuber to do that, give you a platform, other than people who maybe have unsubscribed or something, come on and explain what's going on. But I really would want to know what's going on. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you guys for watching.